Okay, good morning, everyone. I guess we'll get started. Welcome to ATARC's Federal Marketing Virtual Summit. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Tom Suter. I am ATARC's CEO and founder. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and we are a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. And one of the things we're taking on a technology topic, whether it's cybersecurity or DevSecOps or cloud, mobile, cybersecurity. But today we're going to do something a little different. I just throughout this year with pandemic, it's been the hardest year in federal marketing that I don't even know what's in second place. And I just collected a lot of interesting stories. I know we have our story. That's been very interesting, from going from basically doing on-site events to doing everything virtually. But I think more importantly, we've gotten a lot of our partners that we've worked with just been very, very creative and brought on by this pandemic. And I just think back to March, I think it was March 10th, we actually had an in-person physical event on Tuesday, kind of like BC, I call it, before COVID. And we probably had 300 folks there. We called up each of the registrants to make sure that they would attend. Nobody told me or told our team that they would cancel because of COVID. And this is the week before everything shut down. When we actually had the event, normally we get about 65% of registrants attend our physical event. We were about down to 50, which may be the industry norm, not a little substandard for us. So I think a lot of couples had that conversation with their spouse. I don't know if you really want to go to an in-person event. We had the event. There's a lot of, elbow bumps, et cetera, et cetera. And if you'll recall that week, the president had an address on Wednesday night, and basically that we were going to be shutting down as a country. I think at 6 a.m. that next morning on a Thursday, a lot of my staff was at Wegmans at 6 o'clock, braving 2-hour lines. The last physical in-person meeting I had for a very, very long time, I was at the Joint AI Center on Friday, and that was like, that was it. We shut down after that, and our whole slate of in-person events were upended, and we had to adapt. So anyway, I'd like to thank all of our speakers today. It's just fantastic to get a wide variety of folks that from our federal marketing landscape to come in and talk to us today. And we want to make today very interactive. We're going to have a chat session. You can ask questions once we get through some of the keynotes and some of the discussion. But we want to have this to be an open, honest discussion and find out what worked for you. And we'll do something we don't normally do. We'll actually give you the opportunity to promote you so you can be on the panel if you so wish. So it should be a good, engaging day. Really looking forward to it. And right now, I'd love to introduce our keynote for the day. We have with us Adam Vasquez, the CEO of Merit. And at Merit, I know they try to do things a little differently in their marketing. They focus on market invention, and he's going to talk a little bit about that. And I know they have a focal point on category leadership and market share to create exponential business growth for their clients. And if Adam, you can come on and video and audio. Good morning. How are you doing, my friend?
Good morning. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you got that nice corner office setup. I like it. So
the rest of my office off camera is pretty messy with papers and stuff, so don't judge.
Yeah, I've seen some memes about that, but right now you're looking pretty good to me.
Great.
Thank you for your time, and look forward to your comments.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation here. So just bear with me 1 second when I get us all set up here. All right. Just make sure, Tom, we're good. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk about, really call it market invention. Because we're a very technology focused organization and association, I want to focus on calling it really the source code to market leadership. And, you know, a lot of things you'll see as marketers, you'll say, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But for the first time, I believe we've kind of put this together and codified what is the process from going first to last, from last to first, or if you're the leader and going from first to last, if somebody goes beyond you, how do they do it to you? So we really, okay.
Adam, we're not seeing your screen.
That's all right. I will switch it off here. And so you should be able to see
There you
it
go.
now.
We're all
Great.
good. Thanks.
Sorry. So apologize for the PDF view, pane view. I'll make sure everybody sees it. Thanks for the heads up. So what I want to make sure is to know that, you know, I've heard some people call it a new concept. A lot of the stuff, as you'll find, is not necessarily new. It's time and tested. However, what we're going to talk about really is how you go from last to first, or if you were first place, how it happened to you from going from first to last, which there are great examples out there in the market. We see it all the time. And especially, as Tom was saying, as we're going into really another 2021 is kind of a, you know, a year of uncertainty. Yes, we have light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine. However, there's just a lot of uncertainty still in the market, new administration, turnover, a lot of things changing over. And 2020 was a heck of a year, both certainly on the commercial side, because we serve a lot of commercial clients that are not selling to the government, but also from a government side, as Tom addressed. So this really is the best way I know from my experience doing this for my entire career and learning this, because I am a student of this as well, to overcome uncertainty, but also take an unfair advantage while everybody else is focused on marketing to a market. You're actually inventing and creating one. So I like to start off this journey with a fish story. Obviously, this is a very ugly fish. It's we call it, it's a Patagonia toothfish. But I want to talk about a gentleman in 1977 by the name of Lee Lance, and he was a struggling fish wholesaler. And if you really think about it, most industries that exist today are pretty mature, and I wouldn't maybe argue as commoditized as fishmongering, but certainly most people are selling the same value. Well, Lee Lance had the same problem. He's selling the same fish as everybody else, and he's trying to break through the noise, the conversation, offering something new that the industry, the restaurant industry, was really looking for at the time. So he went down to a small South American fishing village in 1977 to talk to his fishing captains who go out and catch his other fish like tuna and other things like that. And was asking him, well, what could you come up with? What other fish do you have? What other things could we bring to market? I'm looking for new ideas and new concepts. So they brought this fish, and a group of captains brought different kinds of fish, but this was the one he liked the most. He ate it and said, wow, this is amazing fish. Why haven't we sold this? I can't believe this isn't in market with somebody else. And they said, well, it's kind of a difficult process. And this was kind of a bycatch, meaning we were catching the fish you were paying us for, and this we caught by accident, just came up with the nets or what have you. So he sat down with the captains to really figure out the fishing process, because it was a new process, to really detail it through. Then he had to go up in New York and get people excited about this new fish, this new market, this new idea. And everybody was looking for a white, firm, flaky fish for a premium price. So New York City was actually the first market to adopt it. Needless to say, it became a huge success. And many of us have had this before, and it's not Patagonia toothfish. It's actually been renamed as Chilean sea bass, because Lee knew that was a terrible name to go to market. So he actually named the market Chilean sea bass. And Chilean sea bass is not actually a bass at all. It's actually part of the cod family. So really, in reality, when you order Chilean sea bass, you're ordering expensive cod. Now, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, obviously not right now certainly with the pandemic going on and restaurants are struggling. However, when returns, it returns back to a multi-billion-dollar market, and it went from nothing. So with that being said, a lot of people say, oh, if market invention is as simple as identifying opportunity, almost like blue ocean, and being first to market. Well, I will say this: market invention is not created equal to first to market, because there are tons of people in businesses that are first to market that never become market leaders. And there are also several first to market people that do become market leaders. And the difference is whether they understand it fully or not, they are doing the things that market invention process. And I'm going to walk you through that. But first, I think it's important for us to understand what a market is. So, a market really is a community coming together to solve pain on shared values. And when we talked about why it's not first to market, a lot of times most marketers think a market is a group of people we're selling to or marketing to or having a conversation with. Now, social media has obviously changed a lot of that. It's not just, outbound. In fact, HubSpot, if you're familiar with HubSpot, invented the market called inbound marketing, which is really that two-way dialogue and conversation. But that is really not new. That is what makes a market. It is a shared value, a shared pain that everybody's trying to solve together based on shared values. Now, what does a market look like? Every market is like this, and there could be multiple markets within an industry. So I don't want to confuse industry with market. And there's the market leader, and honestly, there's everybody else. There's competitors, there's governance. For this federal market, obviously the government is our customer, but there's also governance and regulations in every market. There's influencers, mega, industry. There's partners, there's vendors, other people are partners to these market leaders or these competitors. And there's associations such as, organizations growing the market and enabling the market, such as ATARC. But most companies sell into the leaders market. And, the market leader could be there because they started the market, they were the first to market, or it's just been a very well established and they knew market invention, or they knew the process or these components and they did them very well, or 75% of them, and they became the largest in play. Because most industries are mature, chances are there's a market leader. And certainly in the federal market, there are very well established market leader because it is a mature industry and market. So the real key problem, though, also is everybody mostly stays a follower. And I'll explain why and what this really has an impact on everyone, whether you're selling software, consulting services, or actually hardware to the federal space. Everybody is following the leader, and it's not your fault. And let me explain why. Because let's start off with all markets have a belief system. Remember, we talked about that markets really are a community of people coming together to solve pain with a shared beliefs or shared values. Well, with that pain, if you think about any market leader, anybody who's trying to address this, who started this, the people all came from the same companies. And if we think about our own industry in the federal space, and sometimes it's a revolving door. People come from the market leader, then they go to the next person, they go to the next person. So it's all shared. So they share the same training and ideas, the culture, the processes, the products, and even the language. And why? Again, it's because the market leader is the source. Market leaders are always the source because they're the first. So language, think about the words we're using as marketers. If we talk about mission critical or mission systems, yeah, those are our customers' terms, so that's great. However, everybody says it. If we talk about even how we discuss cybersecurity or AI or any of these other technologies, yes, chances are you're using the same terminology. So in some ways, there's nothing you can do. It's a trap, but in other ways, there's a lot you can do, because if you follow market invention, because you're changing the conversation. The people you hire, we all say, oh, we want people with industry expertise or our market expertise. We're all literally hiring the same people with the same ideas from our competitors, which are going to bring the sameness to our organization. Training. We're bringing the same training. In fact, we're training a lot of times our people on the same types of stuff. Now, there's a lot of best practices out there. I'm not saying avoid best practices, but what I am saying is just be aware that this is making your people clones of identical to the leader. culture. You saw this in Silicon Valley. You know, the initial companies in Silicon Valley, you know, such as the Intels and Ataris and so forth, created the culture of what you see now with Apple, and certainly a lot of the FANG stocks, right? The processes are the same, and even the products with lots of better mousetraps rather than, you know, trying to figure out a totally different approach to solve the same pain, a better way of doing it. And here's the dilemma. By this, because the reality of that you share the value and you are literally a replica of the leader, everything we do as followers helps the leader's market share. And I'll show some great examples about that. But the thing to remember is when someone finds, like say somebody's new to an industry or totally to a new market, or they realize they have a pain that need to start researching on because they're looking for help. Where do we go? We all go to the internet, or we ask a peer or colleague. Those are our two primary sources. And most of the time it's Google, or even YouTube, and social media is increasing too, such as LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, and others in the more commercial space. However, what's happening is through the research, even if you spent on advertising, a ton of advertising saying like, we're the leaders in AI, when somebody starts to research, well, who are the true leaders of AI, then they're going to find who the real leader is. And all you did was spend money to basically drive them to their own recognizing of who the leader is. And this is so true in the digital space. And if you think of even in the event space, when our sales teams meet new people and say, hey, we're a leader in this, we're doing this really cool, procurement is going to do their research, their due diligence, and any RFP usually requires multiple bids. So they're going to find out who the leader is anyways. And if everybody sounds like the leader and the leader is the largest, it's the old saying of nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM. And, you know, and this is, you know, for some people it's a pretty intuitive thing to get. Other people struggle a little bit. But the point in here is you're creating awareness for the market, not you as the competitor or the follower. So when you advertise, you actually advertise for the market, and people uncover who the real market leader is just because there's so much information today. And this is regardless of industry. So I like to use a consumer example because everybody understands Coke, Pepsi. There's a lot of case studies on it. But I just want to show you kind of what's going on here to reinforce this. So this is Google interest over time. And what we see here is we see, you know, this is the number of people searching. You know, for as marketers, a lot of us get this, but as Google Trends, you can put, these are keyword searches. So these are actual branded key search terms. So Coca-Cola versus Pepsi. And these blips here to show my example is, so these are actually Super Bowls. So these are halftimes. So this was when Pepsi did their halftime and Coca-Cola got a ton of spike in demand. And then this is where Coca-Cola did a halftime show and Pepsi received no value from that. And again, this is very macro, very high level, but I want to show people quickly that the follower promotes the leader, but when the leader promotes themselves, they get the benefit and the followers don't. So that sucks, right? If we're not the leader right now, how can we, every dollar we spend, you know, 9 out of 10 of them are going to go to the market, which means could be other competitors, not just you or the leader, but a lot of it's going to go to the leader. How do we change that dilemma? And you know, we talk about market invention, and again, another process, right? But this is very high level, and this has been looking across all the successful market inventions out there across various types of industries, selling to the government, selling to the consumer, selling to business. And it always comes back to really 4 major stages in this process. And I'll be really quick on this. There's an entire keynote, hours of training if you're really interested on this, or you can read Toothfish, gets into it a little bit more detail. But there's the market opportunity, and that's really identifying what's the opportunity. And there's tools and techniques to get there, but what's the opportunity? And it's more than, say, a blue ocean. It is, where can we win? Where's the industry going? Can we leapfrog the leader and win? And then that's the invention strategy. And the invention strategy is, you know, how do we shift the market, or do we create an entirely new category, or do we win with manufacturing speed? Or there's tons of different types of markets you can go after. And this really comes down to what you're trying to accomplish and how you're solving the pain uniquely. And then making the market, frankly, is about educating the market. It's about getting everybody out there, getting the conversation, activating the community, that ecosystem, that market ecosystem. So you're really at the center, working with partners, collaborating, these types of things. And then finally, what happens is there's a big shift that happens between make the market and lead the market. And why lead the market is important, because lead the market is a different phase, because what happens is when you're in that leadership position, you no longer have to educate the market. First, all your competitors that came in and followed you into this market said, oh, we do that too, there's lots of money here, are doing the education for you. And again, remember, they're promoting you at this point. But now you have to defend your leadership position, and you need to think about what is your next market invention or the iteration to what this market you lead in the conversation you need to keep leading. And so that's great, high level process, really vague, Adam, right? So let's get down to a little bit more specifics about how to unlock the unlock your market invention. And I'll move quickly through this, but really you need these components. First, you need a clear point of view, like a clear point of view. What's wrong with the market? And if you're not the leader, usually the leader is creating a lot of pain because they're either addressing it the wrong way, the pain, or they're causing pain because they're not a good solution or the best solution. So what is your point of view? The US Declaration of Independence is actually one of the best examples of a market point of view. And if you think of it in that context, the US is still the most successful country ever, and people are literally dying to come to our borders, to become US citizens, to follow the American dream. And not that we want customers dying to become our customers or prospects, but that kind of demand is something that is the power of this process. The belief system, so we talked about the belief system. The language, your products, you gotta have a product or service. You can't just be selling vaporware. Past performance, you have to be able, people have to be able to kick the tires to see examples. You have to have a story. And as marketers, we tend to just jump into past performance, story, and some activation. But really, as marketers, it's our job to be partners with the CEO of our companies to really own this market invention process. Because as marketers, it's our jobs to establish the community and market and grow the business community around solving this pain. And that is our calling as marketers. That's our higher purpose, is solving real issues, real challenges the government has, or people have, or businesses have. And you need to activate, but it can't just be activation like we think of social media and everything, and that's all important, but you got to think of it in the make the market phase as an education play. So you're going to have to be educating, inspiring, you're recruiting your market. And then the experience. So like, what is your customer experience? And that's critically important. So a lot of things you've probably heard before, but putting it all in context, you know, if there's one thing you absolutely need more than anything is a unique point of view, and it's more than just a value prop, differentiation, positioning. No, like, what are you really trying to, what's the flag on top of the hill of the market that you're really trying to rally everyone to fix and solve? And that's real value, and that's purpose. So a lot of people ask, okay, what will happen? Like, well, leaders will become the follower, or if you're the follower, you will become the leader. This is how it works. And looking across hundreds of case studies and our own experience in doing this through hundreds of clients and engagements, really what happens is we see that right away when you go to market with this, you'll see the impact, okay? But this is your sales and marketing budget. And remember, the other example is when we promoted, the leader got the gains. But in this case, the leader won't get the gains because the leader is not having this new conversation, and in fact, maybe even unaware of what this trend is happening. So long story short, people ask, when can I get the return on investment on this? You can get it as quick as sometimes as 9 months, could be even sooner, the minute you arm your sales team with a new conversation, a new point of view. But you're going to be really seeing that point where you're now the leader, or quickly becoming the leader, a recognized leader, whether it's on awareness or its actual legitimate market share, you start to see that in honestly 2 to 5 years, and sometimes 8, depending on how big it is. But that first year, you should absolutely see the impact. So there is a return on investment for sure. And then when we talked about, this is an example of, this is actually robotics process automation as a real world example. And here are 3 companies: UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism. And I want to show you the direct correlation between market conversations, say RPI, people searching for RPI, with how that directly correlates with the market inventor of UiPath. And they really are the market invention company for RPA. And you'll see that when people search for RPA, UiPath goes up and down with that search in that market. So again, if Automation Anywhere or Blue Prism promoted, they would receive the benefit. And this is regardless of industry. So again, Salesforce .com versus Siebel Systems. Siebel Systems used to own CRM back in 1999. Salesforce.com had 0% market share. And you can see how this happens over time, and that's great. Last but not least, here are some books for market invention books. There's Toothfish, obviously I recommend everyone reading. That kind of breaks down what's really going on. And then Behind the Cloud, Shoe Dog, which is the Nike story, you got the Salesforce.com story, and then Sam Adams' story. And I think they're all great examples of this. So I try to go fast, Tom, lots to cover, but I hope that was helpful for everyone.
Now you talk nice and fast. I think that as I see your presentation, from the business side, it's when we have these downturns and we have this disruption, I think that the things can actually accelerate a lot more. I think that we've seen in the federal space, like in RPA, all the companies that you mentioned, the adoption rates have been skyrocketing. So it's actually, you can go grab market share in an accelerated pace. You don't have to go through the typical evangelization, and it's been changing really, really, really quick.
And Tom, to really quick to that point, like COVID is, you're right, it's been an accelerator. All this stuff was happening already, all these trends. So the companies are really benefiting from this now, or either realizing, oh my gosh, I have to do something different because I'm not getting the calls or the inbound because my sales team can't get out there and we're not top of mind. And then the ones who were starting this process, suddenly that 5 years went to a year. Yeah. And it's like, hold on to your butts, so to speak. So
exactly. That's from Aliens too, I think. I think we're in the right range there,
Right.
Anyway, I even know with our group, we looked at how do we increase our market share? How do we get more eyeballs? And you can double down, or you can just kind of retract and wait out the storm. But I think history proves that if you double down and you have a chance to increase your market share and change things. So when things settle back down, you're sitting up there in the leader area. So good stuff. We're ready to go into our first panel. If Helen and Ashley and Sam can come on, and Adam, you just sit tight. There we go. Good morning.
Good morning.
Get Helen here.
Good morning.
Good morning. I think we're waiting on Helen. Okay. All right. Well, how about we get started with introductions? I think Helen, we'll get her in a second here. Good morning, Sam. And I know you go with Sam a little bit, so I call you Sam, so I can't help myself. Where are you out of today, Sam? Where are you working out of?
I actually work out of Los Angeles, California. My company is based in Reston, Virginia, the Northern Virginia, DC area.
Yep, and Sam is the marketing director at Carousel. Sorry about that. And we got you a little early, but not too early, I hope.
No worries.
Yep. And we also have with us Ashley Goodwin, Senior Field Marketing Manager, Public Sector Confluent. How are you doing this morning, Ashley?
Good. Thanks for having me this morning.
Great. And where are you out of?
I'm at Northern Virginia.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. And there is Helen, as if on cue. And if you can get your mute off. There you go, Helen. Good morning. We have with us also Helen Ortel, Field Marketing Manager over at GitLab. Good morning, Helen.
Good morning. Thank you and welcome. And thank you.
Now,
for
is that a virtual background or is that your house?
No, this is GitLab has our own virtual. We actually do not have any offices, so we are a 100% remote workforce. So they created some virtual backgrounds for us when we have opportunities like this. So.
And that's kind of interesting because that was like pre-pandemic. You decided your company has been virtual since its inception, right?
Correct.
Great.
Yeah.
And great. And where do you hail from? I know it's Northern Virginia somewhere.
I actually was formerly in Reston, and I am currently doing 6 months down in Virginia Beach.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome. So what are we gonna? This is more of like kind of like what did we learn in 2020? And I think we learned a heck of a lot. Maybe I can start off with you, Sam. You know, Carasoft, of course, you have I don't know how many vendors you have, hundreds. And you've had that perspective to see across different sectors, and you've had to deal with a lot of different marketing companies. And, you know, it'd be great to get your perspectives of what you see and some of the trends that you've noticed with Carasoft.
Sure. So first, for those of you who aren't so familiar with Carasoft, we are a trusted government IT solutions provider. We are a master government aggregator partnering with technology manufacturers, many of which are joining the panels here today, and our reseller ecosystem. So we work to serve government end users. From a marketing perspective, in conjunction with our vendor partners, we are hosting and sponsoring hundreds of marketing events every year, ranging from webcasts to trade shows, roundtables, training programs, etc. And outside of events, we're also doing other marketing from email marketing, content syndication, radio, TV, etc. And like everyone, when the pandemic hit, we had to pivot. And if you guys are anything like us, we have overused that pivot word in the last 6 to 9 months here. But for many of our technology vendors, their first response was COVID-19 response. So back in the beginning of March, as things really heightened with the pandemic, a lot of new solutions and offerings are becoming available to help serve the government so they could maintain some level of service and at capacity, because just like us, they were all moving to remote and virtual formats. And many of them didn't have the tools and technology that they needed to do so. So thankfully, a lot of the technology vendors were there in a capacity to help assist them in that. So a lot of our marketing and the marketing that we saw was around response and just helping serve our customers from that perspective. And then second, what we've seen since the pandemic has started is how can we refocus what our original plans were, and can we kind of move those to a virtual format? And if not, how can we put together some marketing programs and campaigns that can still help us meet the goals we had identified? And so a lot of that is easier said than done, and it's certainly been a learning experience and a little bit of a testing experience as well. But we primarily tried to move most things to a virtual format, but we were really careful to make sure that we weren't just moving, you know, this in-person meeting or event to a webinar format, because we didn't want to just hold webinar after webinar. So we figured out ways that we could kind of have these in-person programs in some type of virtual environment. And for some of those, it was, you know, shifting to a webinar type platform and kind of doing a variation. For others, it was investing in new tools and technology in order to hold virtual events. So virtual conferences have become a really big thing, and figuring out how we can kind of shift some of those larger events to virtual environments was a focus there. And what we've noticed, I think, across our virtual events, obviously, like not being able to attend a lot of the major trade shows that Carasoft and our vendor partners have a presence at every year is a big change for us. And amongst other smaller shows too, what we notice is that we're really missing that networking component, which is so much more challenging to replicate in an online environment. And I'm sure everyone else who's online today could second that remark. So figuring out ways that we can kind of get some of that more intimate conversation and networking that we don't necessarily get in a typical virtual environment has been one of our biggest goals. And I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to touch on it later, but figuring out ways to kind of network online, get folks actually talking to each other and comfortable and not just hiding behind their computer screen now that they have that convenience factor. And then I'll leave one last remark. So we actually noticed, we're at the end of the year, we've been pulling numbers. We've noticed a 33% increase in registration numbers year over year. And we actually more than doubled the amount of virtual events that we executed compared to 2019, which is a pretty astonishing fact. I can't believe that we've more than doubled it. And then we've also seen an increase of 10% attendance rate from 2019, and especially at the beginning of the pandemic, we noticed very high attendance ratios in our events, which I think is something that kind of surprised all of us given the state of the country and people's situations and limited working hours and things like that. So definitely some surprising trends and some predictable ones as well.
Great, thank you for that, Sam. And next, we'll Ashley, I'd love to hear your perspectives.
Sure. So I am Ashley Goodwin. I manage public sector marketing for Confluent, as Tom said. And I'll just give you kind of a journey of what my path looked like. So I started at Confluent in 2019, July, so halfway through the year. And I came on, started to build all the structural things that were needed for our business, websites, assets, started to deep dive into planning for 2020, as I'm sure most of you did the same. And those things on our list that on my plan were, trade shows, on-site hosted events, you name it. We were working on it for 2020, and we were just kind of getting into the thick of hosting these type of things. We had just started going on site to different accounts and doing workshops and hosting larger scale events and doing thought leadership events. And we were just starting to get into it, and then COVID hit. And so we had to make changes. And I reflect on it now, and although it was a heavy lift and we had to, as Sam said, pivot and adjust the plan, I think it gave me more of an opportunity to look at how our marketing was impacting the business, and what could I do to think outside the box, and what was actually needed for Confluent at the time. And for us, being a startup, I think it actually kind of happened at an okay time for us. I mean, obviously COVID has been nothing, it's been awful, but for Confluent, the timing worked in the sense of that what I think we needed was to be able to cast a wide net and be more visible. So when I reflected back on 2020, it's a few positives came out of it. Like I said, being able to cast a wide net, we were able to move to digital. And I feel like for us, it was easier to drive more top of funnel leads, which seems interesting, but really it did help us. It helped us with brand awareness. It helped us with thought leadership and being able to engage with third-party organizations like ATARC. But a big part of what we were missing is, losing those in-person trade shows. It was a big chunk of budget. It was, losing that account interaction and having to transition to doing more strategic digital programs. And I think those were key for Confluent in our growth. So being able to get out there and, as I said, cast a wide net, get our brand out there. I think we did an okay job with that. So that was one positive for us. The second positive to it was, like many of you, we host our own user conference. So we have Kafka Summit, and it, just like many of you, it's very typical for us to not get a lot of federal customers to join us in San Francisco, and even harder to get government speakers to, meet us out there and present. So this year with the move to virtual, I was able to host my own government track at Kafka Summit with a few hundred government attendees as opposed to, just a handful. And we were able to have 6+ government speakers there. So without the move to virtual, I don't think that would have been possible. So now we're kind of reflecting on what does that look like for 2021? And I think it will stay virtual. So maybe it will still be a positive for us moving forward. The negative for us is kind of like Sam said. I think we in 2020 lost the account level interaction. Trade shows are a huge portion of what we do in Fed, right? So I think being able to not segment those customers appropriately and meet them in person in one-on-one or in small groups, we kind of lost we just lost that between our reps and us, and from a marketing perspective and just getting out there and meeting with customers. I think it was a big miss. And I don't know, we can maybe talk about it or see if there's other ways to adjust and figure that out. I know I've talked to you before, Tom, about some
Yeah.
options for next year. So that's definitely top of mind for us, is how to get more like engaged at an account level in 2021. Yes, we sponsored virtual trade shows, and I can't say it enough about like the visibility we've gotten from some of the speaking engagements we've done at events, but no one's going to virtual booths. So it's just, there's a miss there. But in general, I think we're making the right moves. And now we can kind of see like what happened in 2020. Like now we know and we can adjust, and I think we can have a successful 2021 and hopefully get back to in person in second half. But yeah, so that is my journey for 2020.
That's great. We'll definitely have to talk. Probably my first question will be around that in person. How do we get back? That's definitely something that you miss in translation with a virtual. And Helen, love to get your perspectives. I know you guys have been busy over there.
GitLab has been very busy. So when I started, I kind of have a history journey as well. I was new to GitLab just before COVID hit. I started just a few months prior. GitLab is a very fast growing DevOps company. And my role was really to work closely with our sales to be able to develop events that were really focused on connecting them and building relationships with customers. So when COVID hit, it really pivoted everything that we had planned. We had outlined all the trade shows we were going to, tabletops, and et cetera, et cetera. What I found that we were weak on when I first came to GitLab was we didn't have a lot of public sector content. So we were really driving a lot of content development very early on before COVID hit, which we were getting ready. We didn't realize how much we were getting ready for COVID. I think back, Tom, to the March event. I remember being at that March event, and we're pretty much driving away, and then the next day DC is getting shut down, and it just feels like so long ago since that day. And we have so many good stories from that event and people that we met. We had the nice speaking opportunity. We were able to network with people. People came up, and it was engaging. That is one of the biggest challenges I think that's going on right now, is the lack of networking opportunities that our sales teams have, that our companies have. To be able to have that in-person touch, it's something that I haven't seen being able to be replicated yet. We did pivot quite a bit. We did look at our messaging. How are we kind of positioned for COVID? And surprisingly, the messaging that GitLab had in play and we were developing worked very well for the COVID. I mean, we were really working on, our tool really helps for streamlining collaboration. We use it here. All of our marketing, everything is developed on our product. So it's really a very fascinating way to collaborate. And as a remote workforce, we developed a remote workforce playbook to be able to help our customers during COVID. And we even just recently announced we have a remote leadership class on Coursera. So that's some of the things that we've done as a company to help others pivot during this COVID world, because I'm not sure how much of going back to offices we're really going to get to anytime soon. One of the other things that we did do that we started just before COVID hit was we had never had workshops before. I knew the value of them from past experiences of previous employers and stuff like that. So our workshops, actually, we had our first one in February at Karasoft's office. It was a great success. It helped us to break the ice with some customers that we were really trying to work with, and it allowed us to build a one-on-one relationship networking. But what we have learned is adapting that to going from a 20-person in-person classroom setting to 100+ virtual was a very big pivot for the company. So it took a lot of the team efforts from our solution architects to the marketing to the digital team, all working together to build those classes. We found those amazingly successful. We find that the registration is very strong on those, and the attendance ratio to registrations is also one of our most successful tactics. So that's one area that you can somewhat collaborate with people in the classroom. So so that's one of our positives.
Great. And Adam, it is a challenge, marketing and sales really working together. And I know that for salespeople, like at our events, they were predominantly government. They loved going there because they get that interaction and literally press the flesh. So I know that's been a challenge for marketing people. You want to add anything to this discussion?
Yeah. Well, it sounds, when this is my experience as well in 2020, and it goes back to the keynote, just talking about market invention, I think, what I heard a lot of is, we're able to establish the ecosystem and work with partners and bring in customers and have this dialogue, in person, but now we had to move to virtual. But the one thing, that really the channel has changed in many ways, the way you get it out to people and talk, but it's still back on that premise of, I heard content and education and thought leadership and really helping people understand and helping them be more successful. I think that's the key with a unique point of view and a unique product and service, because, all of the panelists have those components. I mean, in many ways, you're in those leadership positions because you know how to do this. So I think that's a really key takeaway is, education even more when people are stuck in their houses and we don't have, again, we talked about it, is we lost time with our commutes. And now we start putting meetings in those time spots, right? And like, now do we have even time to think and learn? But also, in some ways, it also created more time for us because we don't have those commutes. So and anyone who is a real leader and knows this, or continuous learners, this is the time to maybe upskill, learn a new skill, learn something new, because the world's changing rapidly and an accelerated pace. So again, it's really exposing people to new ideas and new concepts about where things are going, and then helping them get there and helping them tool up for that shift. And I believe that's really the pivot. Some people were already doing that, but pivoting it back to more virtual, giving more content. And it sounds like a lot of that was happening. So that's great to hear. And it shows success.
Yeah. In our experience, to try to simulate the in-person, we attempted to do the virtual booth, and I didn't know how it was going to go. So we didn't price it very much, and you got a lot out of it. Even if I do think it didn't work at all. I would say we abandoned that principle. And I think the thing that I didn't really understand is it's wasting people's time in the booth the whole day. And I guess that you could multitask, but it was kind of a time suck. So for ATARC, I think the best we've done there is the expansion of our working groups. We have 32 project teams now, and the Zoom has actually helped a lot on the interaction side. I kind of think that I was half paying attention when I'm on a conference call. The Zoom call forces you or Teams or your choice, it forces you to pay attention more. So we've seen great interaction, much increased government attendance in the industry that are there. I think they're getting to develop some relationships. I don't think it is replacing in person anytime soon, but it's a nice bridge, and it's a lot better than being on a conference call, putting a name to a face, and that's been good. But I think most of us are waiting, at least, toward the second half, to kind of mix that up. We have a question that I think that it leads to a next question. Once COVID is over, do you think you'll still offer government speakers a virtual office, option for in trade for going to the show? I think we're talking about a hybrid situation. I would love to hear what you all think maybe about, it's never going to be the same. We're never going to go to an in-person event. I think we'll definitely be having more of a hybrid option. And I'd love to get your opinions. Maybe Ashley, starting off with you. What do you think as you plan out your 2021?
Yeah, I mean, we're all still on the fence, right? As just like you said, maybe second half it could be potential, but I agree. I think that it's going to be probably a hybrid approach, or if anything, maybe we go back to very small groups and doing workshops and hands-on things where you're very separate. I can't really envision a world where we'll be going back to in-person trade shows, where we're all swarming the trade show floor. Like, I don't see that happening, but I think step by step, we'll get back to normal. Probably not this year, but.
Great. Helen?
I agree. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon that we're going back to an in-person event. I don't know where the trade show world will go. I think it will have to be a hybrid. I see small group things coming together where we might be able to start getting some things done. Our company is adamant of no in-person, and there's right now no end in sight on that. So.
And Sam, I know you've been doing the virtual. You guys have always had the webcast, but the in-person was such a big key component. I know you sponsored a lot of different in-person events.
Yeah.
Where's your head at?
I do think that, to both Ashley and Helen's point, I don't think that the trade shows as we knew them are in our near future. I feel like it's going to be at least a year or two before we're back to anything similar to that. For the events that we host, at least the larger ones, we've always tried to do some type of hybrid environment just so we can get that bigger reach. So I think that will continue to be even more important now that even people who are local to wherever the event is taking place are going to have more concerns about attending and things of that nature. I also think that poses a lot of challenges for us as marketers. We're now looking at increased costs to do it in two different environments, and more logistics and other challenges like that. So that's something that's going to be challenging for all of us to navigate as well. Something that I've kind of found interesting is that we've gotten some positive feedback about events being virtual from our attendees, and then less positive feedback from maybe our sales reps and our staff who are actually attending and trying to get things out of the events. So I think it's interesting that it looks like our end users who are actually attending these events prefer to do it in a virtual environment, whereas our teams who are putting them on prefer some of that in-person interaction and components. So something else that we're going to take into consideration as we continue to plan and look forward is what do our customers want to see from us?
That's good. That's a good point. And Adam, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think it's right. I think it's like the old pendulum. Eventually it will settle down to a sort of a happy medium of the two, right? Where it kind of swing on one side, it'll probably, and there may be a rush to do more in person, but I think I think there's definitely a pent-up demand for us all to get together to see. We're all tired of this, right? And, it's been successful, but I think we all want to see each other and just see people, So I think that's really important, but I don't think it's going to be this overwhelming flip, that, the stock market trying to predict and everything else. I don't think it's that. We're not going to go back to the way it was, because there's a lot of productivity and economics to not going back the way we were. I think the other thing is, if you were the lead event going into the downturn, I think you're going to do well after it. I think it's all the competitive events that are not going to do as well as the main event, because the flagship is what the industry is going to want to maintain, and people are going to want to get together and start, having drinks together again and doing, they want to see their colleagues. So I think those flagships will do well, just like a leader, like we talked about, the leader will do well, and it'll suck up all that excess where it was taking on the small events. The peripheral events are not going to do well. And I think regionals will also get swallowed up by virtual events. I think that may happen as well, but who knows?
Yeah.
You don't have a crystal ball.
Yep. From ATARC's perspective, we always talked a good game about reaching out to people outside the Washington, D.C. area. We had all these plans. We never really did them. the way we needed to. We were always worried about, okay, we have a conference, we want to have 400 people there. I think we have increased our list so much outside of the federal government. I was just talking to somebody, out on the West Coast in Portland, the CIO for one of the labs out in the Department of Energy. We never would have gotten them to speak at our event. Just think of it. It's not that easy for somebody to travel to be on a panel for an hour. So we've really been able to target people outside the Washington, D.C. area. It gets very interesting speakers from outside the Washington, D.C. area. And I think that the technology has changed. When I first started doing these summits, I think maybe 7 or 8 years ago, you had to hire a $20,000 production company to broadcast something. $20,000 for an event, $25,000, I'd have to get a sponsor for that. I think it's the tech has really dropped in price, and you can segment people from outside the area to see your event. And I think another thing is, I always thought it's like a little bit strange when you have somebody coming in from Skype and they're on a panel and it doesn't really work that great. I think the technology, we're using this technology, and when we go back to the office, we're going to have a blend. We're going to be some people in person, some people virtual. So I think it's going to be interesting. We have planned our first event in the middle of May. We'll see how that goes. We can scale it. The hotels are pretty good about scaling it. If it's going to be smaller, we have to have more social distancing or less. We can adjust the cost. And these venues they're ready. They call us every day. Are you ready to go? So I think we want to, we'll see. I think we got to be fluid. We had canceled some events, we postponed some events 3 times last year. So it's, you got to be flexible in all this, and everybody's been very, very understanding. Great. Let's go to our next question. I would love to hear a little bit about, how, when pandemic happened, what happened that day? How did you rearrange? Go take us through the process of, you had this budget, you did all this planning. How did things change almost and force us to do it overnight? Maybe start off with you, Sam.
Yeah, I, for one, never need to go back to that day or those couple of weeks. Again, it was very hectic at a work level and a personal level, I'm sure, as everyone can relate. First thing we did is we had a number of events. We're going into peak event season when the pandemic started, right? So we're just getting into the spring and early summer, and that's when a ton of our technology partners are holding major conferences and events. So a lot of us, the first thing we had to do was figure out, how do we, cancel with these venues? And how do we try to get our money back? At least for me personally, I had a number of venues that I dealt with directly, and our clauses did not align with a pandemic. And there was a lot of negotiating and a lot of kind of a waiting out to see what local government mandates were and things like that kind of helped give us an edge in our negotiations. So that was the first thing that we did, was, figure out, okay, how do we pivot immediately with costs and budgets, and then of course notifying our customers and letting everyone know that this is, the stand that this partner is taking, and this is the stand that this partner is taking. At first, it was very sensitive too. It wasn't a kind of a blanket understanding for everyone. And there were definitely some of our technology partners, generally the larger ones, who kind of took the first step forward to say, we're more concerned about health concerns right now than having this program. So a lot of messaging around, and a lot of different messaging too. There are some people who are firm in cancellation right from the beginning, and some people who we're monitoring with caution and we'll notify you later. So focusing on making everyone who needed to be aware of the changes, aware of the changes. And then once we got through all of that madness, we kind of refigured out, okay, how can we still execute what we had in plan?
Yep. How about you, Ashley?
It definitely took a lot of deep thought and planning. Like I said, I had come in, and this was my first shot at building a marketing plan for the startup that I just started working at. And when you have such a large chunk of your budget invested in trade shows, and you have to, like we've all said, pivot and figure out, what does that look like for the rest of the year now? Like, and to Sam's point, that just kept popping up, like the show's canceled, this show's canceled. So it kept going back to the drawing board. What do I do with all these dollars, and how do I transition? And same thing, like I was saying with, we had just started hosting our workshops and hands-on labs. So we had to take a step back and figure out, how are we going to make these virtual? Like, is this technically acceptable? Like, are we going to get attendees to do this? Will they sit with us virtually for 2.5, 3 hours? So those were the type of challenges we had to deal with. Like I said, I think that we thrived in the sense of being able to pivot dollars from trade shows to digital programs. It was, for me, immediately reaching out to third-party pubs like yourself and trying to figure out, how am I going to fill the gap? How am I going to continue pipeline generation at that level? Because trade shows were so significant. And I think I was able to maneuver and find some different ways, to target our market, working on more things that were intent driven, or working to place targeted ads. It just became, it became different, a different environment, and it really challenged me. And it was a hard year, but I think that we came out all right, and definitely learned a lot. And I'm excited to take some of that into 2021 too, and make it even better.
I almost feel like you're a basketball player and you have a really, really, really good shot, and now you can't shoot it because you broke your hand or something. You got to work on everything else in your game.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think we've strengthened a lot of parts of our game. Helen, I know you guys have, you got an innovative group over there coming up with all kinds of wild ideas. Love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I have a similar story to Ashley's, where it was starting a marketing plan kind of thing for the public sector. Before then, we were 100% event focused. I mean, that's what the marketing was for GitLab before COVID, was trade shows, tabletops. That was our market. So it was 100% pivot for the team, and it's still adjusting, and it's still, working with sales. I was on a call just before this, and the sales leader was saying he doesn't know that he wants to continue to do webcasts. So it's still evolving. It's still working on things. I mean, when COVID first hit, we had finance, we had show after show just saying, I'm not going to do it, or I'm going to shift to another quarter. Many of us who are managing the budgets, they're quarter based. So when something goes from Q1 to Q3, it totally changes the whole marketing plan. How could you do this? Is there any kind of price differences? Can you negotiate anything for being able to stay in the show if that budget in the next quarter wasn't built for that show, kind of deal. So it was a lot of working with finance on how to shift the budget. It was really going through sales. Who are the real key customers right now that we need to make sure we keep the lights on and we keep our energy going with them to be able to then drive into the right digital programs. So it was working with ATARC. I think we did one of our first webcasts with you back in April. And
I think it was the first one we did, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah. We were, like Ashley was calling different media houses and what can you do to help us, and how could we get our message out there to the audience that we were trying to reach. So
great. Adam, anything you want to add?
No, I think everybody, it's amazing. Everybody is getting through this. We're all getting through this, right? 2020, I think in many ways was a lot of it's like the old Mike Tyson quote, everybody's got a plan until they're punched in the face, right? So, 2020 was for many people, it's a punch in the face. So but I think the point though is we realized we all relied heavily on events, probably too much, more than most industries, I'll say, looking across other industries. And in our sales teams and even as marketers, that was a crutch. That was an easy place to get, we just do this, just go through the motion, get it. I know it's more than that, believe me. But I think what is challenging us is to think about new ways to get in front of people and new ways to engage. And I think the companies, honestly, the companies that are investing in their customers during this time through education, workshops, skilling them up, gaining awareness, are the ones that are going to win post-COVID, because there's a lot of even leaders that are asleep right now. There's some event companies in the federal space that aren't doing any virtual events. They're just not doing anything. And there's demand. So if somebody's going to fill that pain, which 2020 COVID brought a lot of pain, we talk about a community coming together to solve pain. If you can be that beacon on the hill to help your industry or your market, specifically your markets, your customers, your vendors, everyone to come together, you're going to be in very strong shape in the long term. And I think a lot of people are worried about the near term. I don't have any leads. I don't have this. I don't have, my pipeline stinks, and This is the time to invest and try to raise up and make sure that the industry and our markets are in better shape going into this. And I think whoever does that is going to win ultimately.
No, I think that's a good point. Alyssa, why don't we go ahead and do a real quick poll and engage our bright audience out there. I see I've peeked at a couple of names. We actually have some government people there too that are in charge of promoting agencies. So we got a very interesting crowd out there. What percentage of your 2020 marketing plans were disrupted or changed by a pandemic? We'll give it a few seconds. These polls can work really quickly. Yeah, I think that'll be an interesting one. Okay, we'll give it another 5 seconds, Alyssa. Hopefully everybody's right there paying attention. Okay. All right. I guess COVID has affected things pretty much. I don't know. That doesn't seem so surprising to me. Does anybody else have anything they want to comment on that? Is that about right online?
That's what I selected, so I tend to agree.
I'm a little surprised it's that high, but based off of what everyone else is sharing, it seems on par.
Well, I would say this, Sam, maybe because you guys were one of the market leaders in doing webinars. Like, I had never done one before, and you were always doing them to reach a very broad audience. So you might have been a little set up better for success. That would be my take.
Yeah, it sounds like we might have been, and it was still very challenging for us. So I can't imagine being in everyone else's shoes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And let's go to the next poll question. It's pretty good, Alyssa. All right. What has been your company's main digital marketing focus in 2020? Online events, online workshops or classes, sponsored research, social media, email campaigns, other. We'll give it a couple of seconds. All right. I've submitted mine, so let's go ahead and tabulate. Alyssa? A little bit of everything.
Well, Tom, there's a market opportunity with sponsored research. Nobody else is looking at it. That's a play.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. You know, I think when you're doing, and we have some research that we're doing. We actually, that is my next webinar today. We're working with Helen's group on that they were one of the lead sponsors. That takes a little setup time, you know, and I know, Adam, you've got one out now. That takes a little setup time, but I think it's really, people are going to eat that content up. Maybe they were in battlefield mode and they weren't thinking about, oh, sponsored research, that sounds great. You know, but I think there's a need for that. People are consuming content like crazy. We have some questions around in-person trade shows. That's, you know, for sales, you know, sales loves that. I just don't think these virtual events, at least in my experience, it's hard to do networking there. Does anybody else have any better experiences than I do?
We've actually found some success from our own events in virtual booths, but more so the virtual booths, we do virtual networking halls. And those we were really surprised at the results that we got from them, to be honest. But there was a lot of engagement and interaction in there. And that's where we kind of have found some of our strongest leads. Now, from our experience sponsoring other virtual events with virtual booths, I mean, it's a goose egg. We're not getting anything out of those.
So what's different? What did you do different? What platform did you use among us friends?
We've been using internally 6Connects, and then we've also been working with other partners who are leveraging On24 and WorkCast.
And Sam, also what I found on that is with these networking groups, because some people feel weird just hopping into a group chat video, where I've seen success is having a moderator in these little working groups. Like, you know what I mean? Just to make it like, hey, everyone, thanks. So just make, they're kind of emceeing like, oh, it's you. So you could do a team of 10 or even team of 8, like a tabletop, like a regular table, like at an event, but then make sure you have one of your people in each one of those to kind of, you know, MC, because it is kind of awkward at first. You know, there's a learning curve.
I agree with that. I think that we've seen a little bit of success, especially with our user conference with Kafka Summit, doing like it's less important to do. I don't think people show up to, like we're saying, the virtual booths, but if it's something scheduled, like we were doing a lot of birds of a feather type of sessions, and there's a moderator and it's kind of on the calendar and small groups.
Interesting.
Get in there and they like to engage. They like to talk to others. So like, even if it's outside of public sector, if it's, you know, the financials or, you know, any other vertical, I think putting those people in a room together with a subject matter expert from your company or organization, what have you, I think they're actually willing to talk. So we've seen some success around that.
Yeah, I think the technology platforms, at least some of the ones I've seen, if I had video at least like this, it'd be a lot better. You know, when we used ours, it was kind of a slick platform, except that the users are like texting and chatting, you know, like that's not that great. So I think there's some potential there, and I would love it to work, you know, because I can see us having a real show and then an overlay with the hybrid with the virtual. I think that could be pretty good. I like your idea, Ashley, of having somebody moderated and, you know, drawing people there and making it interesting and really putting some thought there. I think that'd be great. And we're getting close to the end here, but I want to definitely ask a question. How has pandemic affected feeding leads in your pipeline, and how does your pipeline look now compared to before COVID? And maybe we can start off. I don't know if that's how you work, Samantha, at Carosoft, but I would love to hear your feedback.
Yeah, to be honest, Tom, we haven't seen any negative impacts, and I think a lot of that is because we were, prior to the pandemic, such a presence in virtual and digital marketing to begin with. And especially, like I said, as the pandemic first started, we saw an increase in pipeline and lead generation because there was a new need created across the government space due to the pandemic and what everyone needed to continue executing and living lives, et cetera, serving citizens. So not to sound like we're capitalizing on a negative situation, but there were some benefits from the pandemic, and in some ways, and some ways obviously not, as we've discussed today.
Well, and Sam, you know, being at Carosoft, you guys definitely have an advantage with your leadership position. So there's probably also a lot of people that are looking and they're like, I want to go with who I know and a safe option and who's recognized. So again, that shows how you guys are benefiting that, but you've been also, there's a reason why you got here as a leader. So in all fairness, and congrats to you all. But that's that sort of self-fulfilling sort of cycle, right? And it's awesome.
Yeah, I think, Adam, we were talking about, I don't know if it was with you, but if you have a really good network and have a good system going into this, you're going to be in better shape. You're going to be in better shape. And I think, Sam, I don't know what your final numbers are ended up for this year, but I'm sure they were pretty fantastic, as they usually are. I mean, I've seen you guys grow so much, but anyway, Ashley, you want to add anything?
I honestly think Sam hit the nail on the head. I don't even know if I want to further elaborate on it. It's exactly that. Like, we don't want to capitalize on and say that like we benefited from this, but I don't think it was a huge hit to our pipeline generation. I think we were still able to have some small wins there, maybe a few big ones, and definitely we're able to learn from our experiences. And I think 2021 should be I think the worst is behind us. So I'm hoping next year
Yeah.
we can live and learn.
And Helen, you can have the final word on this topic. I think you got the final word for the panel too, because we're out of time.
I concur with a lot of what Sam and Ashley have said, but I would say our leads are more top of funnel than the relationship level that my role would normally be bringing to the company. So we are doing more nurture programs to be able to get them to that relationship level. So we're working the leads a little bit harder than we might have in the past.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Well, thank you, Adam, Ashley, Sam, and Helen for that. And thank you for your questions. And we'll just head right into panel 2, where this is flying by. So everybody on panel 2, if you can come online, we'll go right into it. Bam, everybody's getting on quick.
Hi, Tom.
Alyssa, you might have to release Jim if you, hi. All right.
Me out of my basement.
There you go. There's Jim. Okay, we got everybody. Okay, let me introduce this panel. I'll start off with Allison Mason. She's Senior Director, Public Sector Marketing at Red Hat. Good morning. I guess it is still good morning, Allison.
Morning. Thanks for
Working
having
out
me.
of the home? Nope, no problem, no problem. We also have with us Jim Walker, Federal CTO and Director of Public Sector Marketing at UiPath. How are you doing this morning?
Good, sir. Glad to be here.
Good. And you can thank Adam for his plug of UiPath, I guess, of sorts. So I don't know if that was intentional.
True market inventor, man.
Yeah.
There you go.
Congrats on all you guys' success, really.
Thank you.
Great. And we have with us Elizabeth Hellman, Director of Corporate Relations for Micro Focus Government Solutions.
Hi, guys.
How are you doing? And where are you out of, Elizabeth?
I am in Fairfax, Virginia.
And I think Elizabeth and ATARC shared something. Our coordination didn't work great, but I think we had the last 2 events in Washington, D.C. On that
Yes.
Tuesday, didn't we?
We did.
I was hearing stuff from across town. Some of the people were going to both. So I think we had the last 2 events in Washington, D.C. So, and then we have with the, yep. And then we have with us Alec Bushbaum, Field Marketing Manager at Acquia. How are you doing
Hey, Tom,
today,
how's it
Alec?
going? Good. How about yourself?
Good. And where are you out of?
I'm in Crystal City, so right across the river.
Great, great, great. Well, we're on to panel 2. Maybe we'll start off with you, Allison. I know you had a whole bunch of ground game going where you're going to have all these events around the country, and you guys are very sprawling anyway, doing state and local and all the different federal centers. And, you have your big, probably one of the best events in federal, in my opinion, that's a physical event. So how did mid-March treat you and your team?
Yeah, come to think of it, we probably recently left our big ATARC planning meeting like a month or 2 prior to that. So unfortunately, some of that did not come to fruition. But so hi, everyone. Thanks again, Tom, for having me. I'm Allison Mason. I lead the public sector field marketing group at Red Hat. So in terms of lessons learned for us this year, I would say kind of bucketing this into 3 different categories. Obviously, like all of us on this call, we went from a very events heavy to virtual environment. We spent a lot of time researching the right digital platforms for that. So Tom, I heard you ask someone else kind of what they're using on the last panel. We've spent a lot of investment in dollars with Blue Jeans, Intrado, On24, Rain Focus, and a few others, really depending on the scope and the sophistication of what we're trying to do. But we shifted the Red Hat Summit, which is our large global event, to virtual back in May, as well as our government symposium that you were just speaking about, which happened in November. And some lessons learned there. The positives are that you can scale globally in a much easier way, in a much more cost-effective way when you are virtual. So for Summit, we went from 10,000 people in person to over 40,000 people virtually. And shockingly, and a good thing, is that we actually have more pipeline year over year from our event last year. Now, of course, you're missing kind of that networking, handshaking, relationship building aspect of it. So there's that. And then some lessons learned on the symposium front. So we did much shorter sessions. We find virtually people don't have the same attention span. We included something called Ask the Experts, which was one of our most popular sessions, and that was more interactive, where people could come and talk to SMEs that they don't necessarily get access to day to day. And then also some really cool things on gamification and trivia to help people stay engaged. So those were some lessons learned on the events to virtual side of things. We also figured out pretty quickly that every company was doing this, and so we needed to come up with some innovative ideas to kind of break through the noise. One program I'm really proud of that the team executed on was called, we named it the Coffee Hour series, and it really was an opportunity for our government customers to unplug with STEM leaders that had an eye for open source, open culture, Red Hat values, and the like. And we brought on some really, really cool, interesting people, right? So we had a security expert on who also was, his story was part of Catch Me If You Can, if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
We had a guy that graduated from the Naval Academy, D1 football, a NASCAR driver that had really cool open culture stories to share. The world's most famous hacker what came on, and then we have some really cool things coming for 2021. And that shockingly the series produced $21 million of pipeline so far, which is pretty good for a digital series. So just trying to get the team to think about innovative out of the box ideas. And then the last point here, kind of on lessons learned, is, the shift to digital was already happening pre-COVID. And I think COVID just expedited it. And so we're undergoing a huge 9-month rehaul project of redhat.com/government and our digital properties in general. So we're building them for organic traffic, which is a bit of a shift. We're targeting our mission owners and line of business leaders. Red Hat's traditionally really good at technical marketing. So it's kind of, how are we positioning ourselves to more of those decision makers, and then taking that all the way down to sub verticals and use cases. So big focus there, as well as our paid media strategy. We've invested a lot there as well.
Great. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Yeah, I like the idea of doing the innovative things, that nobody thinks about. It seems like those are really drawing well. Next, we'll go with Mr. Jim Walker. I think the last time I saw you, you're doing a training session at Carasoft. That was, once again, BC, before COVID, so I don't know when I can date that, but I know it was before March 10th.
Sure was. It was the last week of February. And so we have continued those with great success, because when you're doing software like we are, keeping someone engaged on a keyboard through a session is relatively easy. So we have really tried to train people on the software and to show it to them, to demo it. It's okay if something didn't work quite right, we back up and redo it. It really gives them a much more a team-oriented effort, and to put them in teams so that they interact with each other through a week's worth of training really seems to, at the training technical level, really draw interest. We have always been really a light company when it comes to marketing, so we were not heavy into going to events as much as we were going to key events, great partner events. Admiral McCraven, who was a Navy admiral and famous for his thing at Texas commencement, saying, you should make your bed every day, because then you've done one thing for the day. He had a webinar at the very beginning of COVID where he was talking about the snapback. And I'm really watching that. We went from 100% of what we were doing to almost nothing. Every one of us globally, first time ever. And so naturally, some of the marketing was able to snap back maybe to 25% because it was already digital. Now we're over the 50% part in marketing, and we're having Zoom fatigue. We're having email thunderstorms, and those aren't working. I'm right there with everybody. We've almost tried to make our in-person events virtual, and that doesn't really work. So I'm interested to see how we recreate the new, you know, keeping the good pieces of what's happening right now, tossing out some of the other stuff. Because the salespeople certainly think touching hands and meeting each other at that event is important. But the one thing that we know for sure, government can't shut down. You can shut the gym down. You can close down the dance theater. You can shut down the movie theaters. You can shut down restaurants, open them and shut them down again. Government can't shut down. So we are really seeing the government innovators reaching out saying, we need information. We don't need a big sales pitch. We need to know solutions. Yeah. And so solutions, I think, will be the way forward to really help them, is to come in, here's a solution.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a good point. I just think that we have gotten such better response from government people than we ever did to speak, and they get back to me in 5 minutes. You know, it's like, I think that people were physically in meetings most of the time. That's why they never got back to you. And then they come back and I like that email storm. I kind of understand that completely. Yep. Good term there. Thank you for that, Jim. And next up, we'll go with Elizabeth Hellman over at Microfocus Government Solutions. And you did get your Fed Day in under the wire somehow.
We did.
So that was kind of nice, right?
Yes. So we actually had our largest event of the year. It's our annual Gov Summit. It was on March 10th. So almost perfectly timed with, you know, every state putting out different restrictions and mandates and, you know, limits on, you know, how many people could get together. So I think we were lucky. We got our event in on a Tuesday, and by that weekend, I think almost every company in the DC area was working from home that following week. So we were lucky enough to get it in this year, but now we're almost a full year later where we're looking at what do we do for this upcoming year. So following that Gov Summit, just like many of you, we, you know, started focusing on virtual events, attending a lot of these trade shows that we have in the past, you know, testing out how do these virtual booths work. We also incorporated into our plans a heavy shift on COVID itself and how our solutions could actually impact the direct issues that our customers were facing in real time. So, you know, kind of all hands on deck, we updated our website to have COVID specific pages. Our social media team was helping, you know, our content teams to create digital content around, you know, how can you keep your agency secure when people are working from home, you know, two-factor authentication, things like that. So, you know, really almost immediately shifting to those direct problems that our agencies were facing and holding webinars around it. I think that allowed us to keep in touch with our customers and know that we understood the issues they were going through. We also leaned a lot on our employees to help us. I mean, we always lean on our sales teams to help us, you know, reach out to customers, but setting up things like a social ambassador program where our social media manager was pulling, you know, here's the top content from the week, help us share it, and rewarding our employees for doing those activities to help us get in the door where we wouldn't normally be able to when we couldn't go to events. So, you know, I think just really shifting and trying to get creative with what we hadn't done in the past. Looking ahead now to, you know, just going back to our government summit in particular for FY21, I don't think any of us expected that we'd have to be looking at a virtual event, but I think the opportunity in all of this is that it's helped us to step back and kind of refocus our entire marketing plan. So, you know, in the past where maybe we would be replicating what we've done to say, you know, this is what we've done for the last 5 years and it's worked, let's keep doing it. We don't have that luxury anymore because a lot of trade shows from 2020 still haven't been fully postponed to 2021 yet, or we've prepaid for things. So now we have budget that doesn't need to be allocated towards it. And so I think it, in a way, has been a really positive opportunity for us to look at, like, how do we be more strategic with our account-based marketing? Like, do we really need to attend this virtual show, or could we get more out of it by doing something different? And that's kind of what we're looking at doing with our annual government summit. Do we, you know, push it later into the year and hope we can be in person. And it's actually caused our sales teams to give us feedback to say, well, actually, you know, we've always done it in March, but October might make more sense for how the government is buying and how we're having our conversations. And so I think it's forced us to reevaluate, you know, do we do things the same way we always have? And it's kind of been an opportunity to refresh, which I don't think is a bad thing to be doing over time. But sometimes you just get used to that cycle of doing things the way you always have. So, you know, in that way, it's been a positive.
Yep. And Alec, I always think of you guys. I always use this example. So for digital transformation, you know, we really shouldn't have to wheel our 96-year-old grandmother in the Social Security office. There should be some better digital experience in the 21st Century Idea Act. And now you really literally can't wheel your 96-year-old grandmother into there. So I would love to hear your perspectives, because your company is about, you know, serving the citizens in a digital way. And you know, love working with you guys on the, you know, the 21st Century Idea Act. But you know, how did all this affect you all and have to change some of your strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think echoing some of the sentiment that we've already heard, there was already a shift to digital going on, and then 2020 came around and it just accelerated everything to where just literally overnight, everybody had to transition everything into a digital format. So our first focus was really figuring out where we could help. So early on in, you know, February, March of this year, we did a few projects, most notably with the New York State. So we really helped them. We have a digital experience platform, and we use agile services to get websites up quickly. So we offered them a lot of complimentary services just because of the massive issues that they were having with the dissemination of information to the people who needed it. So we helped them spin up a bunch of websites in just a couple days so that they can start actually keeping COVID dashboards up to date, keeping current information to their constituents out. And if you remember, guidelines were changing almost on a weekly basis. The CDC was recommending different things, and the New York Department of Health was recommending different things almost on a day-by-day basis. So it was really important for them to get accurate current information in front of people, and that's where we stepped in, was just really trying to help them get those websites up, get digital and mobile friendly pages up that they can get that information out. And then focusing back on the marketing side, from an event standpoint, so I cover SLED and education and Fed, so I'm all over the public sector space, but we really started to notice all of our webinars and our digital events were starting to get a lot of attendees. So we were almost doubling the number of attendees that we would normally expect, but we were only getting half of the conversions that we normally expect. So we had to double the number of leads we were getting to keep on pace with some of our goals for the year. So I think in Qs 2 and 3, we saw that number of attendees to virtual events really skyrocket. Everybody was home, everybody was going to virtual events. It's kind of a good way to break up the day in a lot of cases. And then throughout Q3 and into Q4, we started to notice that attention span really dropped off. People were still attending the events, but they just weren't paying the same amount of attention. The conversions weren't there. You would notice if you had the technology to track when people were dropping off, people were starting to drop off of webinars pretty early. You'd get people's attention for 15 minutes tops, and then they'd really stop paying attention. So we started to convert all of our events into really bite-sized, digestible pieces where people can come in for 10 or 15 minutes, either hear from a peer that has relevant experience or hear from an expert in the field who has something to say that they actually want to hear about, and try to actually provide the attendee with something useful, with something that they can take back and that they can think about or chew on. We really cut back almost entirely on, you know, quote unquote sales pitches, because that's just not what anybody was interested in hearing. As soon as you start plugging a product or plugging something that you're coming out with, you can literally see the numbers drop off if you were running an event, and they just didn't want to hear it. So we focused on, and I think people were saying the similar thing, really focusing on our customers, what they were experiencing, what problems they were having, and providing them forums to talk to one another. So especially in the government space, that was the key to continuing a lot of the conversations and really finding new opportunities for us to work with the government in new and unique ways. So I'd say that was really key, especially in the government space. Just provide them with what's useful to them, provide them with a forum to talk to each other and work out issues amongst themselves. I think this is helped by the fact, and speaking to Allison's point, the open source community is great with this already. So moving everything into digital, moving everyone home and giving them somewhere to speak to one another was really helpful to us and really helpful identifying the pain points our customers were feeling.
A lot of great points there. I know with ATARC, we've done these tech talks and built them into our programs. And I've coached, you know, you just can't do a commercial. People turn it off. You know, it's like the old TV, you know, they will turn off that channel as fast as possible. And nobody wants to see these just outright sales pitches. And
exactly.
Forget it.
And that's another thing. It became key to work with reputable organizations like ATARC that have an audience that are already plugged in with these communities. I think you and I had conversations on, we've done a couple webinars with y'all, where the first thing we always say is, we don't care about our subject matter expert talking. We want to make sure that this is something that's useful to the audience. And that's, I think that was key across the board. ATARC's been great about it, making sure that the content is really something useful for the audience, that they're coming away with something and it's not a sales pitch in any way.
Yeah, and you all get it. And I worked with everybody here, so I kind of, you know, you wouldn't be on the panel if you were any different than that. But every once in a while, when somebody goes rogue on us and they have their presentation, they run it by me, and then they go into the sales pitch, and it almost is. I have people text me like, well, I know this isn't the way you do things, and what happened here? You know, I actually had that in an event, and the government people went and actually said, we don't want to hear this anymore. So, you know, it's kind of like this old school, I got to go do a sales pitch. Adam, you've heard all the panelists. Anything you want to add?
I want to pull out a little nuance of what Allison, you had said. So when we're talking about inventing markets and nurturing markets, I think the successful companies are going to be in the best position post-COVID are ones that have been working to nurture those markets, not just chasing trends, right? So if you're saying like, oh, we're digital transformation, this is what we do, that's kind of chasing an industry trend. So you're kind of always going to be evaluated as what everybody else is doing there. So not that you can't be successful, it's just that there are plenty of leaders in that space already. And so if you're not the leader who's known for digital transformation, then you probably missed it because it's a bigger industry trend, right? But what Allison was saying when she was talking about getting people around open cloud, right? So that idea of openness. So when you talked about the one speaker that you brought in that has nothing to do with code, but he's an open culture, he believes in openness and has been hugely successful in that thinking, that's a market, right? Because it's more about that rallying call. So a lot of people will get confused about, oh, it is a service, it's a category thing. But the most successful brands had a category thing, but it was broader as a cultural thing. It's a thought process, it's a philosophy, which is what Red Hat's doing very successful. So, you know, I think everybody needs to have a gut check and say, hey, am I actually kind of feeding someone else's market, or do I actually really have like a thing here that we're actually doing? Because if you're not, you can be interchanged by anybody who offers the same service for cheaper. That's just the reality. So, and by the way, when we talked about market leadership first to market isn't the same as market invention. Why? Because you could launch a new category and be like the bee's knees as far as this new idea, but you're not doing anything to nurture the ecosystem and a bigger idea of why we're coming together. You will lose that position. You will lose eventually too. And so I think it's just something that isn't necessarily intuitive for most people. And Allison, you said something there that's kind of sparked that. So kudos to everybody who's doing this already. But I think that's a really important piece, which goes to more that brand side, which is hard to measure the return on investment. So this time isn't about leads. It's about taking the high ground and helping that people navigate and nurturing and bringing in that market and exposing people to that bigger pain that we're all solving together with shared values. So.
Yeah, and Adam, if I could add to that, I feel like we are a technology company, but the conversation's much bigger than technology. Yeah. And that's the whole point of that, right? Like you have to have cultural and organizational buy-in to achieve DevSecOps or to achieve digital transformation. And so I think that's a lot of what open source stands for, quite honestly. And I think that's why that people plus process plus technology message really does resonate. and we want to position ourselves as a partner to help government with their business challenges, not let's sell some technology. So, and trying to do that in a way that is more about like, let's all come together as, you know, a common set of folks, right, that are all trying to do better for citizens or for mission or what have you, and get them in a place where they can collaborate, you know, in an environment. And it's not just about the tech. And I think that's why that series has been so successful.
Great. We have a really good question from the audience for somebody that could have probably wouldn't have been a good choice to be up here. How do you score leads from virtual events where there aren't interacting with them like you are in person? How do you distinguish between a hot and a cold lead? Maybe start with you, Allison.
Sure. So most of our large virtual events are multi-session. So we can track who went to what, how long they stayed, how they interacted, if they were engaged in the chat. So we really look at, you know, if somebody comes to one session for 10 minutes, they're probably not nearly as interested if somebody stayed on the platform for 2 hours and attended multiple. So we look at that, and we also look at, you know, the streams in which they're interested, right? So if we notice that somebody's attending all the sessions on automation, clearly they have an interest there, and that helps us follow up in a more appropriate way. And then of course, now with digital, one of the positives in that is that we can track everything. So we also see, like, is this person just coming to this event, or what have they done with us over the past 3, 6, 9 months? And that all goes into the algorithm as well.
Great. How about you, Jim?
Yeah, so basically the same thing. I do think that when we do pieces of our platform that are unique, that we wouldn't expect hundreds of people to attend to, that we want to consider that if people came to that, they're interested. And so we would want to reach out to that total population. But in the webinar world, that might only be 20 people. But it's the niche part of the platform that says, that's the only 20 we're ever going to see, but they're the ones who would need it. You know, we also are, I think, trying to consider most leads that come to something now are going to be useful leads. Right? If they just open an email, just don't mess with it. But if they clicked on and looked at something, or if they attended for a little while, because of the Zoom fatigue, because of the thunderstorm of emails and all that, if you're looking, you've got more than just a passing interest today. You know, they're at the point where they don't have time to, or the desire to just look at everything that comes across. So I think we are weighted a little bit more towards, you know, following up as at least with something else to gauge a little bit more, maybe not very intrusive, but you also don't just wait it out for 6 months to see if they do something else.
Yeah, it seems like we're putting more time and thought into this now than maybe we did before. Oh, they attended a virtual event. I think we're probably digging into the data a little bit more, it sounds like, from you all. How about you, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I'll echo what you know, has already been said. I think for us, we're really focusing more on the quality of leads versus like the quantity. So in the past, you know, I think sometimes when you're reporting up on events, it's like, how many leads did you get? How many people, you know, came to our booth? But now it's looking at, are they actually quality leads? And also, you know, partnering with our sales teams to make sure, you know, we're getting the right people to these events. You know, I think we've all agreed that there is a little bit of that digital fatigue right now. And so making sure that if we are going to invest in these events, are our sales reps able to have meetings with the customers that they want to see at these events, to just make sure that we're, you know, able to progress those relationships versus, you know, just looking for new leads that maybe aren't going to get us anywhere if they're not engaged with us.
Yeah, and I think even when you're in person, we've got a pretty good crowd that comes to ATARC events, but I've been to events where you got the tchotchke person. They're going around everything for their grandkids. That's probably not a really good lead, you know?
Right.
So how do we not waste time on that person? They're probably very nice, but we don't need to waste time on them.
And Tom, the other part, if they don't believe in the same value proposition, or not the value proposition, but the value system, or your belief system, say like a Red Hat, when somebody doesn't believe in true open source and that collaboration, they can have a lot of money, but that's probably not a good lead in the long term. You're going to lose them, right? So that's a lot of people miss, I guess, from a marketing side.
And Alec, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, really just echoing a lot of what we've heard already. We use a pretty intricate scoring system. So if somebody stays on for an entire event, they get a higher score than if they drop off early. Really making sure to pay special attention to the people who, like everyone said, have a real focus on what you're providing. So if somebody watched an entire hour-long webinar, chances are that they are worthwhile of following up with. They dropped off after the first 5 minutes, chances are they're not. But much to what Jim was saying, all leads now are pretty important. So we do tend to work very closely with sales to analyze every list that comes in, see what titles are on it, making sure that we're on target. And we've got a pretty built out BDR team, business dev team, that'll follow up with almost every lead as long as there's not something to disqualify them. So I think that that definitely echoes true to what we're seeing here.
Yeah, we did get a dissident that commented on the tchotchkes. They, you know, about how great they are, and you know, they are a conversation starter. And if it can lead to, the reason you give the tchotchke is to get that great conversation going. So I don't think anybody's against that. Anything else you want to add to this, Adam? Go ahead.
No, I think, you know, it's the cycle of leads. You know, it's probably, you know, every marketer's, you know, we get hit over the head by the stick of lead gen like every day, right? But in all honesty, I find a lot of people are focused on the wrong things when it comes to lead gen. They're focused on like numbers and content and the number of like quality, or not quality, but quantity. And I think that ultimately erodes our credibility with our sales team and our leadership team. So you know, it's about that quality. And I think most scoring methodologies measure volume and activity. They don't necessarily measure like, is this person really, you know, and how you would do that is you could create content that is specific around you know, your point of view and other things. And if they're reading that and consuming that, then you're like, okay, they're buying into the way I think. So they're already sold. Now it's just a matter of finding time and when it works for them. And I think that's where a lot of people miss, because that whole upfront part where you can actually qualify or disqualify people saves so many missed calls, so much waste in the system, and your own credibility as a CMO or a VP of marketing or a marketing manager.
Oh, I agree. Alyssa, why don't we pop in a couple of poll questions? They're looking pretty good. I'm really interested to see the results, and then we'll get back to the questions. If we can pop that up. Okay. What has been the biggest challenge your marketing team has faced in 2020? Digital fatigue, personalizing customer communications, realizing bandwidth and being strategic, generating leads, other. All right. This is a good one. I think we got this from one of you all. Just take a few seconds. Let's go ahead, Alyssa. I think that's enough time. It's quick decision time. Okay. It's a little bit all over the place. I'll tell you what, I got some numbers right here for ATARC. We've done, like, this is information is old. Since April 16th, we've done 33 webinars, 4 virtual summits, and 3 agency spotlights events. And we just had an IRS event a couple weeks ago, and we got like 1,300 people. I think one thing that's forced us to do is increase our government audience. I really kind of like just focus on the government. I know the industry comes, but one of the things that we did is partner with the IRS and partner with NASA and partner with USDA, and they did a lot of the promotion and having that target-based marketing. That's really worked for us. We've gotten, at the IRS event that we did, we had over 1,300. NASA 438, USDA we had 576, and half of them were government people internal to that agency. But I think that if we just kept our list the same, we've really tried to reach out and increase our list, and we've got a team that is really good about, hey, somebody joins the event, they're in our system now, so they're in the system. I think if we just had a static list that we had pre-COVID, we probably wouldn't have been able to increase our webinar presence. But I think that people are getting a little fatigued, and you've got to stick out. Anybody else want to add to add to that? I think that was a good question to talk about. And maybe Allison, you guys do a
Yeah,
lot.
I mean, I'm actually surprised the digital fatigue number isn't higher. I would have assumed that was the biggest by far. I think, you know, I heard an internal presentation the other day, and I think it was Chanel or someone like that, and it was, before you leave the house, take off one piece of jewelry. And it's so true, because I feel like as large as our team's getting, we're doing so much. It's almost like less is more, right? Let's do less, more targeted, account-based things than just fill the calendar, and perhaps we'll see better results. So that's one of the things we're going to really focus on in 2021. And to your point, we're doing what we're calling a Voice of the Customer program, where we're bringing in our government customers to share amongst their colleagues and making it very account focused. So it's like, you know, the champion at the agency, share this interagency with your friends and your peers, right? And that seems to be getting more traction because they feel like it's built for them versus this mass overarching, you know, public sector event. So
Yeah.
It's more expensive, and it's more, you know, it's harder to execute on that. But I do think it's paying off for us.
Yeah. Anybody else see any surprises in the poll?
I don't think necessarily surprised by it. I had actually responded the bandwidth and being strategic. That might just be personal to our team. We've had a lot of changes throughout this year, you know, people coming and going and transitioning. So for us, I mean, similar to what Allison was saying, though, we do want to look at how we can do less, but get more out of it. So I think for FY21, we're looking at, you know, just general brand awareness for us as well. You know, how can we partner with our partners or with industry experts who can help us, you know, reach our customers, and I guess more of a thought leadership approach, if you will. So, you know, working with like Government Matters, for example, they're a great partner of ours. WTOP, like doing some more media stuff, which I know Adam mentioned, sometimes it's harder to sell that because you can't quantify the results of it, but I think it also, you know, hits our customers in different areas, especially while they're working from home. If they have the TV on, or if they are in their cars, you know, driving their kids to school or whatever it might be, just making sure that we're reiterating our message and that we are there to support them in different ways than we have in the past. So I think just looking at, you know, I think when we think digital, a lot of times we think webinars and email campaigns, but also thinking, you know, how can we reach them in a media aspect as well? And I think that will help our teams to, you know, from a bandwidth perspective too, to rely on some of these partners who have these audiences for us to, you know, kind of come in that way as well.
Great. Jim?
Yeah, I'd echo the media. So we've been good users of WTOP and of Gov Matters, and it just seems like the people who are really interested in government are going to be there. And so you're going to where the clients are, and you've got, you know, in the case of Francis, I mean, Francis does an amazing job at getting you to answer relevant questions that he thinks the audience cares about, not relevant things that you want them to care about. You know, and so the publicity and the announcements on WTOP, people are driving to work, they hear a little ditty about something, you know, and there are creative ways to be able to track some of that. But I do think it's valuable to just get that brand out there in something other than they only see you when you're coming to say, can you write a check?
Yeah, and I would just say this, you know, when you do media, it's about almost pouring gasoline on the fire, right? It's about expanding it and quickly. But if you don't have a real fire, or you're sitting next to somebody else's fire, then when you throw gasoline on it, it's going to help other people, and you might just get a little bit burned, like you just spent a lot. So I think that's the trick with trying to prove ROI from playing the short-term lead gen game versus the long-term, you know, brand building game. And there's a balance, and sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of people, you know, don't have enough experience to understand that you got to do both. And I think that's, Elizabeth, I think that's what your challenge is too, right? Is trying to get the leadership team sometimes to understand we're going to have to invest in this It may come in a couple years from now, maybe 3 years. It could come in a couple months, could come next month. But we got to be willing to make those long-term investments, knowing that there may not be ROI. It's like Tony Shea said this, from late Tony Shea from Zappos, and, talking about customer experience. But I think it resonates with this too. It's like, what's the ROI with hugging your mom? Right? I mean, you're not going to measure that. I mean, some people may be negative ROI, but other people, hopefully it's positive ROI. And there's a lot of people that wish they had that opportunity still. So I just think that that's kind of the conversation that needs to happen too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I hadn't thought about that in a while, but we try to get the media to moderate our panels, because it's kind of a force multiplier, especially that they're probably got a better chance to have it coverage. So when we do our webinars, we try to get as much coverage as possible. One event that we did that was really successful, we did with Carasoft on FedRAMP, and that's where Congressman Connolly talked about the FedRAMP bill. Of course, that's gotten shot down here in the last day, but it was in the summer. But we had Francis Rose, who they're kind of built into the event. He did some emceeing. I got up a little bit, but the great thing was you'd pull these government speakers off the stage, and then they would go get interviewed. And it was like a great event by itself. But then you had that for months afterwards. It was on TV, and you could repurpose that. So when we were actually talking to them about a partnership, I forgot all about it, but right before COVID, about having them, be there as a presence. I think that's a really good way to do it. Really good way to do it. And at ATARC, we've always been very friendly to the O'Keeffes of the world, and they have great reporters, FedScoop, and we try to mix it up with our panelists and get them involved, because I think that we have a really good media that covers things. And if we got a government success story, I want everybody to know about it in the building and outside our webinar. So I think that was good. My next question is, okay, we're doing 2021 planning, and I think I'll be doing my 2020. I think we have 6 webinars this week, so it might be in a couple of weeks we might do ours. But what does that look like? Besides, you're not in person in the war room. How does that look like to you? And maybe I'll start off with you, Elizabeth. Where's your head at for, this is more of a future-based panel. What does it look like for 2021? Where's your inside baseball stuff going there?
So for us, our fiscal year actually started November 1st. So our 2021 planning kind of started a few months ago, when, things were probably even more unknown than maybe they are right now. So I think, obviously we don't know when we're going to be back to in-person events. I think we're hoping that by our second half, which would be, next summer into like the fall and winter, we're hoping that we can be back in person. So for the first half, really just looking at, meeting with our top sales leaders to see, what their top accounts are, how we can target them in, I threw out a word to our sales team the other day that they really loved, which was like, how do we make our events more exclusive? So, even when we can go back in person, I don't necessarily see that being a world where we're having hundreds of people in a room right away. One, whether that's even allowed, or 2, whether people feel comfortable. So I think looking at, how do we ease back into that world? We actually were just on some calls yesterday for our government summit, which would have been in March. And I mentioned earlier, we're looking at moving that to the fall, and maybe doing something smaller digitally with Micro Focus, who is our software company, and then we're the government arm of them. But they have some really global, large digital events in March that, we're looking at, can we be strategic and tie into their events, save our resources for, when it makes sense in the fall, and kind of utilize those relationships to still meet with our customers, almost do like a prequel, if you will, have some government tracks virtually, get them interested, and then, keep those touch points throughout the year until we can hopefully have something in the fall. But, we've talked about making our events where typically we'd have, 2 big keynotes in the morning and afternoon and, 20 different sessions throughout the day. Maybe it's something smaller where we bring, our top targeted agencies or our top customers together to have a conversation. I think someone mentioned that earlier, like, can we, bring our customers together around a topic or an issue that they're having and have them have those conversations. So instead of, putting them in sessions where they're listening to a product pitch or a demo, can we get them engaged? And is that going to be more beneficial to them? So, I think just looking at overall, like, the bandwidth and what people are going to want to do is what our focus is on. And then honestly, just looking at how we're supporting our employees behind all of this as well. So my team does marketing, but we're also tied into a lot of our corporate relations. So like, what marketing can we do internally to support our employees who at this point are, fatigued themselves and, have their plates full and understanding that their worlds look different as well. So what can we do internally to keep that momentum into 2021 and keep people happy and connected and engaged in a world where, it's just very different than I think any of us expected 2021 to even look like.
Right. How about Acquia, Alec? Where's your head at?
Yeah, for sure. So we are got a lot of changes going on. So we're actually rehousing our webinar team. So we have a separate field events team that was generally out in the field and in-person events, and that's the team that I'm on. And we also had our webinar team that was mainly focused on webinars, digital events, and the sort of things that would happen online. So in 2021, we're combining those two teams. We're making sure that our schedule of webinars is working in conjunction with our newly founded field marketing events. And on the field side, we're focusing, I think, echoing what everyone said, on more exclusive, intimate events where you can have actual real conversations and you have a higher quality of lead as opposed to the quantity. So echoing a lot of the things that people have already mentioned, it's really important for us to have real, true conversations with stakeholders, figure out what their pains are and what their plans are for 2021, and try to work with our customers, work with potential new customers on being the agency that they need in those projects. So a lot of it's listening and figuring out where people's heads are. I think we're at a point in time where as there's a lot of academics and a lot of smart people making estimates of when we're going to be back at in-person events. But there's bits of news and information coming out every day that either makes you think that might be in April or makes you think that might be more towards the October, September period. So it's really up in the air. Nobody knows. I think if anyone says they know, they're a little overconfident, and that we're at the point to where it's a whole lot of we're pretty much entirely investing in digital at this point, assuming that in-person events won't be happening until much later in 2021. Our first big challenge is we have our annual conference, which is slated for October, and so we're going to be at a resort down in Miami. And we're moving forward with the assumption that it's going to have to be hybrid at the very best case, that we're going to only invite really key individuals or people who need to be there and who have a reason to be in person and on site, and offer to most of the audience the ability to log in online and stay safe and stay home during that time frame. And that's in October. So that's, we're still a ways out. We're planning for that.
Hate to say it, but I do think you're safe. That probably prediction might not last, but I think you'll be safe. Jim?
Yeah, so I couldn't agree with Alex more. Whether you're talking about the television show The Voice or churches, they've realized that they can have people in their pews, but they can also use those Zoom sessions. I'm thinking that going forward, instead of figuring out how we snap back to what we used to be, that we really start thinking the technology is always going to be there. I can take an hour of your conference or I can take 0. Which would you prefer? I have a whole day to go, but another person only has an hour. And if you can get them for that hour, it could make a difference. So we really reimagine and reinvent those. The other thing I'm thinking about in 2021 is we have to finally appreciate that there was in COVID, there was this curve of work of the virus, and we wanted to flatten it. Well, there's this huge curve of work now that's built up and pent up because employees went home, they had to learn to telework, they've had illnesses themselves and in their families. while they were doing that, the workload was backing up and that. We cannot be embarrassed to be marketing to the government. The government has a page on the US digital page now where they're saying, if you're a private company that can help us, please register, right? Almost every state has the same thing. If you're coming with a solution, you don't have to be, Allison, you said something earlier about didn't want to take advantage of the fact that we're having some good time. Yes, they're good times, but they're good times because they're helping the government provide the services to citizens, to every citizen, legal, illegal, here on a visa, here not on a visa. Everybody that's here has got to be helped by them. And so this is an opportunity for us to help them with our solutions. So I don't think in 2021 that we're going to be worried about that and saying, oh, we don't want to sound like we're marketing. Yes, we're marketing a solution that you said you need. And so 2021's got the opportunity to be exciting, and it certainly has to be better than 2020. Although I think legislation that extends 2020 out to about June or July,
Oh no,
crap in just one bad year would be good. Let's don't over into 2021. Keep it, just extend the year.
let's not do that. Allison?
Yeah, so I agree with Jim. I don't think we're ever going to go back to what it was. I think just like as consumers, we'll probably not consume the same way. I don't think B2B and B2G marketing will either. So it is kind of an interesting time and challenging and exciting in some ways because it gets us kind of thinking outside of the box. But so Red Hat's currently heads down in CY21 planning. We are on a calendar year. Fortunately, we plan in 6-month increments. So we know we're going to be 100% digital till June. That's kind of a Red Hat policy. And then we're going to probably shift into a hybrid approach for second half. That's what we're planning on. So in first half, we're really focused. I think I joined right when Helen Ortel was finishing her comment about this, but I couldn't agree more that we've done an exceptional job of top of funnel lead generation this year. That's pretty normal for digital because typically your hands-on events are the ones that really are kind of mid-funnel. So we're spending a lot of effort on how to move those leads through conversion and mid-funnel activities. And so some of the examples there are the smaller, more intimate executive roundtables, the voice of the customer programs I spoke about, more account-based hands-on workshops. There are 20 people that